kick us off with the intro whenever you're ready.
Yeah. Hi, Adam. Nice to see you again.
Good to have you, Elena. Good to see you.
Yeah, thank you so much to accept my invitation. Happy to see you, to have you as my guest. To our audience, to our friends, Adam is experienced real estate investor. He is member of SubTo community. It's Space Morbi community, and he done several nice deals. And he always makes his relationship with private money lenders. So he is my guest to help real estate investors, especially newbies, to understand how private money lender world works. Thank you, Adam. And I hope you will share with us some great insights how it works. So,
yeah, we work with new investors and experienced investors, and so a lot of things that we do with the newer investors is we actually teach them how to build a deck, what private money lenders are looking for, what private money partners are looking for, and how we can best kind of hone. And we usually verify their deal, their experience, and we work with them directly as like we facilitate those conversations. We'll have the conversations. Usually I'll set up the meeting and I'll be in the meeting with the borrower and the lender. So that way everybody gets their questions answered. And if I feel like there's information that's missing, I will usually jump in and say, hey, Elena, like you may want to tell Bob over here, who's your potential private money lender, like you may want to tell him about your cash on cash returns, right? And we do that because I can read the room usually, and we can say, Bob's not looking all that interested, but if you can, usually there's little subtleties and things that we pick up on that will help you secure the money or to get your deal across the finish line.
Yes, awesome. Yeah. We all realize our lenders should work and feel secured by us, right, all the time. And investors, the business first should be how to protect our lenders' capital first. Adam, in your experience, what are some subtle red flags that private lender might notice in a potential investment opportunity that others might overlook?
So lenders are looking for two primary things. They're looking for the strength of the deal. They want to know that it is actually a deal. And then they're also looking for how they're going to get paid back out of the deal. So a lot of times borrowers will put in terms or they will structure deals in such a way that it is not the most favorable to the lender. And the lender is immediately going to say no to that. If they feel like it's going to take too long to get paid back, if there's not enough equity that, God forbid something happens and they have to foreclose on the property or they have to do something in order to recoup the money that they put into the property, and they perceive it to be difficult, or even you as the borrower, if they perceive you to be difficult to work with, a lot of borrowers don't want to be forthcoming because they have perceptions and expectations that private money is super, super easy and fast to secure. And what I usually tell the borrower in that case is to check your ego at the door. It has nothing, like you're not entitled to their money. We get that a lot. Like these lenders they want too much. Well, how do you know if a lender wants too much? You don't, right? Because at the end of the day, if it's their money, that it is you're at their mercy. It is whatever makes them feel secure in your deal is what's required. Now, private money lenders and partners do oftentimes skip and streamline a lot of steps and timelines even that you would not typically have to go, or that you would typically have to go through for an institution. However, they are still allowed to ask for whatever they want, right? Like they might want you to do a soft pull on your credit. They're not asking you for a hard inquiry or a full credit report, but they may just ask you like, hey, Elena, I want you to go into Credit Karma and I want you to screenshot, what that score is. and submit that in your documentation. Like that sometimes is required, and that's what makes that lender feel secure. So I would say the things that most borrowers overlook that the lenders catch on to is usually just difficulty and friction, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're not if you're not forthcoming and responsive and communicative, all of that
Right.
comes across with how you handle the paperwork in the beginning. The phrase we hear a lot from lenders is, if they act this way now, how are they going to act when they have my money?
Right. Right. Very smart. Yeah. Awesome. And it was actually my next question. So, how what is the best way for beginner a real estate investor to start building relationship with lenders? What we should understand?
I would say that the best way to build relationships with lenders is just to build relationships with people. Like, I think people segment the two as if they're different, but lenders are people just like you are, just like I am. You know,
Yep.
I'm not personally a lender, but one day I could be a lender, right? So you should be investing in that friendship, in that communication, and you should be investing in all those things now, as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
waiting until you find out that that person has money to deploy, because then it comes across as greedy and selfish, because you're only talking to that person because they have money to deploy. So if you want to build a
Right.
relationship, start now. Talk about what you do and talk about it frequently and in all the circles.
Mm-hmm.
If you're buying RV parks, then tell everybody you know that you're buying RV parks, because in SubTo, the average student has about 60K to lend. I learned
Mm-hmm.
that from going through the vault.
Mm.
Paste that in one of his recordings. The average SubTo student has 60K to lend, which means that, you know, in theory, I could be your next lender. You could be their next lender. Anybody that they come across could be their next lender, but you don't know that until you start building the relationships. And
Right.
understanding like who people are and what people do is really, really important, because I get messages all the time saying, "Hey, I know that you're a lender." And I tell them, "No, I'm not a lender. I never once told you I was a lender. You're not paying
Right.
attention." Right? And if you're not paying attention to what I'm saying, then why would I work with you moving forward?
Right. Right. That is actually what about uh, Pace always teaches us, right? And my lender, my mentor, Jesse Stanton, teaches us relationship first. Don't chase for deal, chase for relationship. And this phrase I've heard many times from JJ as well. So first relationship, right? And Adam, what are the best strategies? What are the most effective strategies for newbie, for new investor? Would you suggest? I suppose we should be honest. We should be open, right? We should tell our potential partners we are new. We just started doing our building our business. We building our team. But what is specific is about relationship with lenders from and new investors.
So for new investors, you don't have a network yet. The biggest thing for you is building your network. And it is, like I was just saying, it is building and investing in the friendships now. JJ says that a lot. He's like, "What's the
Mm-hmm.
most valuable thing I can offer you?" And most people always respond with the answers you would expect, like time, effort, energy, attention, things that are truly limited and they are scarce and you don't get them back. And he says, "No, the most powerful thing I can offer you is my friendship." And that's the truth. Like,
Right,
I have 300 contacts in my phone from Sub2. Those are 300 people that I could pick up the phone today and I could call them right now and I could talk to them. I could tell them what's going on. They know who I am. They have my number saved. Like, we text from time to time. I schedule meetings with them. So I would say invest in those relationships now. Show up to those Zooms, show up to those meetups, start talking to people, find out, like, get personal, find out who they are, what they do, where they live, what they like.
mm-hmm.
Um, most of the conversations I have with people that I work with are not even real estate related. They can be
Oh,
all kinds of different, we talk business, we talk real estate, we talk faith and family and fitness and like all kinds of other things. It's getting to know the person on a real level that they feel heard, seen, and valued. Because if you can make them feel
mhm.
heard, seen, and valued, then they will reciprocate that.
Right, right. And I like this word value actually. And I'm always trying to understand what is the best value us investors would able to bring to lenders.
I mean, again, I think the value comes down to your friendship and who you are, right? The best value that
Hmm.
you bring is to be a good person with good morals, principles, values, ethics, like things that matter, to show people
Yeah.
that you're not just a borrower, that you're a friend, that you want to take care of them, that you want to help them, that you want to keep them secure, right?
Hmm.
Because the best thing that you could do as a borrower is, if even if a lender is starting to skip steps and like maybe they're not as secure in a deal as they should be, if you point that out and say no, right? Like if I'm asking you to be a private money partner and you're telling me, well, I think we can secure this with a joint venture, I'm going to tell you no. I want you to be on an LLC with me, even if it's a sole proprietorship for this one property, and we're going to have an operating agreement in place that's drafted up by a lawyer. And you might be like, why? A joint venture could be drafted up by a lawyer too. Yes, it can. But what
Right.
is the likelihood that the joint venture, which is a non notarized contract, is going to hold up in court if you and I have a falling out, right? So it's having other people's best interests at heart and like
Hmm.
really living that. That's the value.
Right, right, right. Yeah. Yeah. It's everything around humans relationship, right? From either side, we will look at this topic. Everything first about humans relationship. Yeah, personally, me, I've got the problem, funny problem. So I started building relationship with one lady. She is a lender in SubTo, and we became really good and close friends. And right now, I feel myself not too confident to ask her to become my lender, because really I want to make sure for 100% she is secured with her capital, right? And first, she is human in my life. I don't want to put her in any risk. And this is, you see, this is another side of our relationship. So,
Okay.
what do you think? What is your advice for people like me?
There's people that fall on two sides of the coin, right? There's the people that come outright and they ask for the money up front. Hey, Elena, I heard you got money to deploy. Here's a deal. And they just throw you a pitch deck. They don't tell you hi. They don't tell you who they are. They don't give you any level of introduction. They don't build a relationship, which is usually the quickest way to get your pitch deck thrown in the trash. And then there's the other people on the other side of the coin that, like you said, they're building a relationship. They want to know that their person is secure. And if you really want to build the relationship further with her, what I would tell her is, hey, I have a deal. I know you're looking to deploy capital. Would you mind getting on a Zoom with me and we can talk about it? Maybe we can underwrite it together, because as a lender, they should be doing their own underwriting. Like you should be doing yours, but their job as a lender is to do their due diligence, not just on you, but on the deal. And so they're going to re-underwrite the deal to make sure that not only is what you're saying true, but that it fits their criteria, right? Like you
Mhm.
might have a flip that you need 80% LTV for.
Yep.
Well, they're going to re underwrite that flip because they might only lend up to 70% LTV. And so they're
Hmm.
going to check and make sure and see where the numbers fall. And then sometimes you guys can meet in that middle. Like if you're at 74 and they lend at 70 and you need closer to 80, then sometimes they'll move the requirements if you have the experience to back it. But
Hmm.
for you, with making sure that she's secure, I would just run it past her and say, hey, I have a deal. I think this would be a good fit for what you typically lend on. Like, let's get on a Zoom and let's talk about it. Let's underwrite it together. and let's walk through it and see if this is something that you like. Because if it is,
Mhm.
cool, and if not, then it gives you the opportunity to get the constructive feedback and to tailor the
Right.
deal to make it to something, and you can then find the lender that is the perfect deal for.
Yeah. It's great, actually, great advice to go through the process together with a potential partner, right? It gives
Mm.
us chance to answer all questions, right? To make sure we are on the same stage, we understand their situation correctly, right? Because sometimes just misconception, misunderstanding between people can happen, right? Yeah.
Miscommunication is probably one of the biggest things that we see happen in the space and why deals fall apart.
Mm.
The
Oh,
lack of
could you
lack of
could you
communication.
please give us some example of miscommunication?
So there's miscommunication, and then there's lack of communication, and there's also lack of clarity. Right? You might miscommunication, I would say, is that you might say something and you didn't mean it in to be in that context. Right?
Uh-huh.
You might say you might you might deliver the wrong information, and you might do so even unintentionally, and that's okay. That happens. That's human.
Right.
Um, but lack of communication is really where deals fall apart. Most deals will fall apart with a lack of communication because you're just not being upfront, and it goes back to what I was saying about the ego and not want and being combative. I had a deal fall apart not that long ago because the borrower did not communicate with the lender that they were trying to get a solar lien removed. So the lender was scrambling because the money was in an IRA, so it requires a
Right.
custodian, and it requires
Hmm.
several days to transfer that money into escrow. So she rushed and she rushed and she busted ass to get that money into escrow for us to not close
Right.
on time. Well, why didn't we close? I don't know. Talk to the TC. Like, no, I'm talking to you. You are the borrower. If I'm asking you the question, you need to answer it. Don't tell me to go to the TC. Don't tell me to go to the person that arranged the meeting. Like, I need you to, when I'm asking the question, I need you to answer it.
Right.
Because the borrower
Fair
didn't
enough.
tell me. The borrower didn't tell my lender. He just decided he was going to go off because this should only take a day or two. Worst case, we'll close on Monday. And it ended up, it was not ready to close until almost 2 weeks after the original COE. So the lender actually took the money back out of escrow and backed out of the deal.
Oh yeah, it's fair enough. It's fair enough. So your point stays on we investors should be always proactive, right? We never should break up conversation. We always have to make sure our potential lender receives information in time, right? We should always to put ourselves on their position and to predict what kind of information do they need, how fast do they need this answer. Maybe we can provide something additional to make our offer a little bit more solid, correct?
Mm-hmm. You you should be proactive. You should be clear, and you should almost over communicate. And I say almost intentionally because there are some people that will just spill their guts and keep you on the phone for hours about what all is going wrong with the deal. You don't need to tell them everything that's going wrong with the deal. You just need to tell them, "Hey, look, this happened. We found out there was a solar lien. We didn't know there was a solar lien. We're working to get it removed. You don't need to rush to get your money in escrow. Maybe do a little bit of extra due diligence if you feel it necessary. But we're gonna get this removed, and then we set the new COE out for another week." So in all of our joint
Right.
ventures that we do, we put our core values in the joint venture because if you don't meet the core values, then it's an immediate cause for termination, and we just terminate the JV there. And those three values are integrity, honesty, and communication. So if you
Mm-hmm.
don't, you can do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it, and you can have integrity, then we can work together. If you can be honest, which is to have integrity with your word, we can work together.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can communicate in a way that's effective and concise, like an adult, like all people should. You should not be afraid to have difficult conversations because there are no difficult conversations. You're framing it that way and creating this extra anxiety in your head about having the conversation when
Mm-hmm.
you just have the conversation up front and be like, look, this is what it is. These are the circumstances, and this is how I'm handling it.
Right. Right. Yes. Awesome. Thank you, Adam, for all these values. I hope it will, I not hope, I know it will help investors a lot to understand how private money lender world works. I just, while I'm networking, we all learning all the time. And what I've noticed, there are different types of private lenders. Some
Mm-hmm.
people, they manage their own money, maybe their family money, maybe their friends' money. But some private lenders, they hire manager who
Mm-hmm.
manage their money. So it's really confused me as an real estate investor because I realize we need relationship first, as you told previously. But how I can build a relationship with lender who potentially could lend my creative deal, it means this person will sit on second lien position, right? Which is kind of unsecure compared to first lien position. So how I can build relationship with my lender if I don't have access to lender? And how they, so, and second logical question, how they will take decision to trust me because they never met me before. Of course, we will meet during the conversation discussion about my deal, but still we don't have any previous conversation. So what is the best exit? What is the best solution? What do you think?
So there's a couple of things there, right? Like very few people have managers for their money. The most people that we've met that have managers for their money are people that have insane amounts of money to lend. Like we're talking like family offices. In
Mm-hmm.
which case, it's more important that you build a relationship with the manager anyway, because that, at the end of the day, it's the financial controller that is either going to send the money
Yeah.
out or right. You're not trying to like you can build the relationship with the banker all day long, but underwriting is where your deal goes to die. So, if in this case, to keep the analogy, you would do better building the relationship with the underwriter if you have direct access to them, aka the money manager,
Mm-hmm.
because ultimately they're the ones that usually know the ins and outs and what's actually going on the ground. Like I see
Mm-hmm.
that all the time. One of the companies I work with right now, I work more with her assistant than I work with the owner of the company because the assistant knows all of the ins and
Mm.
outs. She knows the
Mm.
travel schedule. She knows the events. She knows where she's staying, where the owner is staying, when she catches an Uber, when she doesn't, when she's out of town, when she's doing this, when she's in that meeting versus this meeting, and so on and so forth. So oftentimes the money manager is the one that has that better knowledge anyway. Now
Mm-hmm.
there are different kinds of lenders. There are the private money lenders that are just person to person, right? And they usually are managing their own money, and so they will usually be the ones that send the transfer. You
Mm-hmm.
see that a lot. Now, a step up from that would be if it's in like an IRA or something, then they would have a custodian, but in which case you don't deal with the custodian anyway. The custodian is merely doing what the person is telling them to do. And we've seen that. Now, to get a little bit more advanced, there are people that actually have funds and they raise capital for their fund of funds or whatever their debt service fund, depending on what their model is. And then they lend money based on what other people invest into the fund, and then they issue returns to their investors.
Mm-hmm.
So again, in that case, speaking with the investors doesn't matter because it's a fund, so it's a syndication.
Mm-hmm.
You're relationship with the money manager anyway. And
Right.
then the next step up would be the family offices, which you're not getting a meeting with that family, right? Like the Rockefellers have a family office. You're not talking to the Rockefellers, you're talking to John Smith, the guy that runs the office. He's the one that does all of the approvals and denials. He's the one that's going to
Mm-hmm.
underwrite your deal, and he's the one that's going to wire you the money. So either way, you just have to build the relationship with the person that's in front of you and the person that ultimately is the decision maker. That's all sales is it's building relationships with decision makers, and not always the person that earned the money is the decision maker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really cool. You just said so. Anyway, build relationship with person who you build relationship first. Yeah, good manager responsible for someone's funds anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's great, and even so, I've noticed private money lender world changes constantly. People manage their funds different ways, and they united with another lenders. They hire manager, they hire connectors, and it's interesting to observe how capital raising world works and how it changes constantly. Yeah, it's really cool and interesting. And I was always interested how private money lenders survive in a market where institutional lenders are flexible with their terms.
I mean, the private money lenders have to be flexible too, right? Like they have to
Mm-hmm.
constantly adjust. They crack down on requirements when times are tough, and then they loosen the belt a little bit when times are not as tough. So, but private money lenders, institutions have not the worst rates in the world right now. Like everybody's saying about how bad the rates are. They can be bad. Historically, they've been much worse. We all know this, right? Like everybody talks about it.
Mm-hmm.
If you're age, like your parents probably came up in the 80s or whatever. If your parents are older than that, then they remember when they could get a mortgage for like 18%, and it really puts into perspective that these like 6 to 8% rates are really not that bad. Um,
Yep.
But again, right, you're not going to a private money lender for the rates. Typically, you're going to them for the speed and the convenience and having that personal relationship with somebody. You're paying more for a premium service. You're paying more for somebody that is going to close a lot faster, and you can secure private money lenders. Usually, I've seen them go secure money for as cheap as 4%. It's very, very rare,
Mm-hmm.
very hard to find, especially right now with inflation. But
Mm-hmm.
it can go really high just depending on the state that they're lending in. They have to be mindful of usury laws, right? There's certain states where you can't charge interest above a certain percentage um, without triggering a usury law. And if they usually trigger a usury law, the consequence of that can be fines, and it could also be them losing all of the potential interest on the loan
Yep.
if it's found to be predatory. So they private money lenders and partners toe a tight line. They really, really do. But they do the best that they can to be competitive and friendly. And while they may be sometimes usually in about the same range as the hard money, in that 12 to 20%, they they usually try to be as flexible as they can, and they try to make good decisions on less information, so then that way they can do it more expediently for you and your deal.
Yeah. Right. Uh, I always have a question. So, what is the main difference between underwriting from the investor's perspective and from the lender's perspective? What lenders pay attention on, which we don't?
I mean, realistically, there should be no difference. If you're a good and savvy investor, you're going to underwrite a deal as best that you can, and you're going to underwrite it as close to how a lender would. And most people use
Mhm.
pretty much the same calculators. Sometimes the borrowers do use more rudimentary calculators, and they account for less. But that's just a repetition thing. That's more of an
Mhm.
experience issue than a knowledge issue. They don't know what they're looking for. I would say the biggest thing that most people need to look for is, especially in the space of flips, accounting for like the true
Mm-hmm.
ARV. If Because one of the things I see a lot is they will, and this is primarily to flips, but this could go for any deal. You go to acquire a deal, and you see that there's this large spread. There's a large number in between the ARV at the top and the acquisition price, right? And you're sitting there thinking to yourself, "Man, this is so great! I'm going to make so much money. It doesn't need a lot of work. Um,
Right.
this is awesome. I'm going to make a killing." Well, what ends up happening is the reason that there's that big of a variance in the spread is not because the house is such a good deal, it's because the house is so large, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I've seen this happen at least 3 times in the last several weeks.
Oh, yeah.
So it will not be an average size home. It will not be a 1,500 to 3,000 square foot home. It will be like
Mm-hmm.
a 5,000 square foot home. And so they come to us and they're like, "Yeah, this is great. We're gonna make all this money. We got it for 420. The ARV is 650. All it needs is light. It needs fixtures, floor, and paint." Okay, that's a pretty light rehab budget, typically. However, you come up with what your rehab budget is per square foot, and it
Mm-hmm.
might be a low number, right? It might be $10 per square foot. Okay,
Right.
well, your rehab budget ends up blowing you out of the water because you now have to apply that to 5,000 square feet to get your proper conservative underwrite. The whole house uh, might not need flooring, or you might only need to touch up in certain rooms, but you should be underwriting it and budgeting for as if the whole house is going to need it in underwriting, right? You're applying that $10 to $15 per square foot across the entirety of the house. And
Mm-hmm.
what's happening is the acquisition price paired with the rehab budget ends up being too high when they consider the true ARV or the as is value, depending on which one the lender goes off of. And then that puts your LTV into a high risk category. So for the last person we helped with this, their rehab budget ended up being like 70 grand because the
Ooh.
house was so large, right? This price per square foot was low, but the house was 5,000 square feet. And so it ended up being 70 grand. And when you accounted for the acquisition price and the rehab budget, they were at about 85% LTV or 85% of the true ARV. And the
ARV
lenders,
85, yeah, too high.
yeah, it was like 84 and a half. And the lenders would not go above 80, and they did not have the liquidity to cover the gap. So they
Mm-hmm.
ended up having to wholesale the house because they just didn't have the liquidity to cover the gap. They could have borrowed the 80 and put in that extra 4 points or that 4%, and they could have easily taken house, rehabbed it, flipped it, and made their money back and then a little change. But because they didn't have it, they just didn't account for how skinny the deal was. But again, right, like there's a reason all these things are done in percentages and ratios, and that's why, because the numbers can fool you. If there's
Right.
200 grand between that, now if the ARV would have been a little bit higher, which they anticipated it would have, they might have been okay. But here's the other thing that was a real big learning lesson in this. They wanted to dispute. They said the ARV was like 650 instead of 625, which is what the appraisal came in at. I hate to tell you all this. The lender doesn't care what you think it is. The lender cares what the appraisal says.
Right. 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 They believe in numbers, right?
They believe in
They
numbers.
believe
They believe in
business.
data, not drama. Right? They believe in what can be proven on paper, and everything else is just relative.
Right. 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 Yes. Great point. Great point. So for me, it says, especially for new investors, it's very important to start working with a asset that requires no or as less as possible rehab. Correct? not to mess with numbers, not to mess with rehab calculation, right? Do you agree with me?
I would say generally, yeah. Usually, more turnkey properties and lighter rehab is better to find when you can find it. Some people will go into the moderate rehab. For all new investors, I would say, generally speaking, want to avoid anything with fire, water damage, or full guts. That's way more work than what you're prepared to do. Rehabs can be not so bad, but again, you have to get your acquisition price right to account for the rehab. You need to account for more than what you think. Like, I generally would probably tell people, come up with your rehab budget and then probably add like 20% to that. So
Mm.
you can get the right deal on the right house, and it requires like light to moderate rehab, but you account for your rehab budget plus a buffer. I would say go for it, because it is really, really difficult to find turnkey properties right now. Even some friends of mine that have bought some, some relatively new builds have found that like they still had rehab to do on a house that was built in 2019 or 2021.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sometimes you ask yourself, you're like, how is that possible? And simple answer is not everybody lives to the same standard. So I would generally say you should look for turnkey when you can find it. However, also understand that most people's definition of turnkey is rather loose, and so most properties will require light rehab, which is okay, but
Right.
give yourself a good buffer. Like I said, mark up your rehab budget probably 20%, maybe even 30% if you're trying to be really safe, and guard yourself and your lender's money, and make sure that all that's accounted for before you actually get the house under contract.
Right. Great point. Thank you so much, Adam. Yeah. And I have another question. So we are in creative community, creative finance community. And I've noticed many lenders, they still prefer to sit on first position. They don't want to sit on second position because they want to feel more secure. So how to find balance between first and second position, and how what is the way for us, for investors, not to persuade, but at least to build correct dialogue with people who anyway loves to sit on first lien position?
So first and second are what we see most commonly. I believe you can have up to 8 lien positions on a single property. Yeah. But here's the other thing that you can navigate too, is you can also have more than one second position as well. So generally speaking, I would say if you have a creative deal and you have somebody that's first position only, generally speaking, those people have a lot more money to lend. They usually have in the millions of dollars to lend, and that's why they will only accept the first lien position, is because they have so much money to lend that they don't have to put it out there to unnecessary risk. So generally speaking, if you get a really good rate with a first position lender, what I would do sometimes is I would just let them buy the house for the entirety, and they can buy out whoever would be the first position lend. So first position could be the mortgage that's in place if it's a subject to. It could be the seller if it's a seller finance. And in certain cases, if it's a hybrid, you could also have the mortgage with the seller in a second lien position. So most of what you're going to see in the creative communities is going to be a second lien position.
Right.
In order to navigate that, you need to do as much as you possibly can in order to make them feel safe and secure in the second lien position. You generally want to acquire properties that have a good amount of equity. You want to acquire properties that that are in good areas, that are in appreciating markets where there's population growth. You generally want to do things like like title reports and title insurance, right? Because that's a big reason why the second is so it can be unsecured is because of what they call secret second. So if you don't have title insurance, and I can go file for a second lien position on that house, and it might even be a fraudulent lien, but it still takes time and effort to remove that fraudulent lien, and it can affect how the lender is secured and how they would collect on if they had to foreclose on that property, right?
Yeah.
It can take away from the equity that is established in the property already. So generally speaking, and this goes back to what I was saying earlier, right? What is too much for a lender? Well, if the lender is willing to do the second lien position with you, you generally speaking just need to do whatever that lender needs or requires in order to feel safe and secure in your deal. So, like I said, that typically comes with title insurance and title reports, and it typically comes with maybe a background check. Your part, it might require like a soft credit pull. The investor passport, if you have the money, is great. Go to Melissa Palmer. Shout out to her because she's awesome. Like you should be doing whatever you feel is necessary in order to make that lender feel safe and secure. They are putting their money with you, and so that's what I would say is the biggest difference for the second lien. When you find the people that are willing to do the second lien, do whatever it takes to make them feel good about it.
Yeah, great point. Adam, thank you so much for all information, for so many golden nuggets. It's really amazing. It's only 40 minutes and you brought so much value to our community. Thank you so much. So as for conclusion, could you please give us a couple bullets? What are the most important would you to deliver to investors to understand?
Yeah, so I think a couple tactical points you could definitely take away from this. Do not overcomplicate your deck. Everyone wants to overcomplicate the deck. They want the prettiest colors, the nicest transitions, the best headshots, the longest bio. Don't worry about all that. Forget all. Throw all that out the window. You make a Google slide, and we use Google because it's so easy and quick to share. So create Google Slides. It can look like a third grader made it. The most important thing is that there's a couple of pictures, a short bio about yourself, a little bit about the property, a little bit about the comps that you did, a little bit about the underwriting, and make sure that everything is delivered clearly and concisely in your deck. So that's what I would say about the decks. About networking with lenders, I would probably say, like I said, just network all the time. Just tell everybody what you do. If you want to be the king of Section 8, then tell everybody that you're doing Section 8. You're going out and you're looking for properties. You're underwriting them for Section 8. If you're looking at RV parks, which is what I'm looking at right now, start telling everybody, I'm looking at RV parks. I'm looking at RV parks. Start networking with those people. Ask them who they know. Get referrals. Ask people who are deploying capital. Who can you start building those relationships with? And like I said, overall, just don't overcomplicate the process. I had somebody ask me the other day, like, should they put their core values in their deck? No. Why not? Because they don't need to know that. They don't care. You should be living your core values well enough that it's communicated through who you are, and not through a sheet of paper. Like I said, just make everything easy to read, easy to understand, and easy to access and share. So, and the final point on the slide deck I would say is, if you're going to use Google Slides, go in your share settings and make sure that anyone with the link can view it. Because I can't tell you how many times I get sent decks and either I have to request access to it or the lender has to request access, and that only further delays your process. So make sure that everything is shareable, it's legible, it's readable. Don't spend too much time thinking about yourself or the pictures of you or the property or any of the unnecessary details. Communicate what's important to show that the deal is a good deal. And then when the meeting is struck and the meeting happens, that's where you can talk about the more personable details, because they don't care about the core values. Like I said, they want to get on the meeting one-on-one like this with you. They're looking at your body language. They're looking at how you talk. Are you flustered? Are you aggravated? Are you talking really fast? Are you nervous? Do you have a lot of nervous tics? Like, they're trying to get to know you as a person, and that's where the personal details come into play, is in the meeting.
Right. So first, we are humans, first of all, right? And everything happens based on our relationship and how we treat situation, how responsible we are. Thank you so much, Adam. It was awesome. It was awesome. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it a lot.
Of course, Elena. I'm always happy to come on with you and chop it up.
Thank you. It was great meeting you again, Adam.
Good seeing you,
Thank
Elena.
you.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you, everyone, for your support, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.